Evolutionary astrology is a key to unlocking the mystery that is our soul's journey, not only through this life, but previous lifetimes as well. Evolutionary astrology takes a much different approach to analyzing the symbols, whether you're looking at the planets, the signs of the zodiac, or the houses that they're in, and whether you're looking at your own personal birth chart or where the planets are today. Really, the goal of evolutionary astrology is to find our paths of evolution. The philosophy at the foundation of this style is that we're here to evolve. We're here to learn. We're here to grow, to mature, to expand our consciousness. Therefore, I feel it's very important to leverage tools like evolutionary astrology to give us key insights into our unfolding journey, with the goal being to accelerate our evolution, not only psychologically, but spiritually as well. If we transport ourselves into the future, towards the end of our life, we want to be filled with joy, compassion, contentment, a feeling as though we really gave it our all. Probably no desire to start over and do it all over again. We had successes, we had failures, but we learned a lot. We grew a lot. I think we all want to get there. If that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if that's the treasure, I really feel the birth chart is the treasure map, because what we find in it are encoded instructions for a life well lived. It will highlight of course, your personality traits, but also your deep inner psychology, and also your paths of evolution, and your gifts, and your passions, and your destiny, so to speak. Because in accessing your passions, living through your passions, accessing your destiny, that will accelerate your evolution as a person. Evolutionary astrology reminds us of the things we've always known about ourselves. Now, we all have varying degrees of self-awareness, but it's so easy to get caught up in, the needs of survival, to get caught up in reality, to get caught up in our own busy lives. So much so that we commonly lose track of ourselves and we feel a bit lost. So in comes astrology and tells you your blueprint of the psyche, and reminds you, hey, don't forget, you're an artist. Hey, don't forget, you're a teacher, whatever. And it can be very confirming and very inspiring, and give us a bit of a course correction if we're led astray. That's one of my favorite parts about it. And I've always been interested in using tools like astrology that are deeply introspective. I first got really into the Myers-Briggs personality test, because it led me to realize that, wow, I'm really weird, compared to other people. We're all intricate, very complex puzzle pieces. And in knowing that, it leads us to have more compassion and lighten up on ourselves. When I was younger, I had a very immature perception of reality. I would get caught up in feeling negative emotions about other people and their actions or their words, or having judgments towards them. And that really came from a projection of mine, thinking, okay, this person didn't act into accordance to what I feel is appropriate, therefore I judge them. It's a very immature way of looking at reality. And really that stemmed from, a perception that, everybody must be like me, which is obviously very wrong. So it led me to have more compassion about myself, and that I'm strange and different, and also that everybody else is so different, and it led me to have more compassion for other people as well. It's one of my favorite things about using tools like this. Evolutionary astrology really transcends the just descriptive style into prescriptive, because it's like, okay, once we understand your personality traits and the psychology underlying those traits, and we also understand your gifts, your passions, and your paths of evolution, with those clues and insights, we can practically apply them to our life to accelerate the process of evolution. And really, that's where the rubber meets the road. Now, from a more spiritual/philosophical perspective, evolutionary astrology presupposes that we came from somewhere before we were born in this lifetime. I use the reincarnational model, but you can also substitute that with other language like, this is how God made me, or, it's having to deal with my genetics and it's in my DNA and ancestry. I feel that there's compelling evidence that points to reincarnation as a reality. But regardless, by looking at what I call the chart behind the chart, by looking at the nodes of the moon and any planets interacting with the nodes of the moon, we can understand your karmic circumstances. And it gives us a deeper layer of context as to why you are the way you are today. Why are you going through some challenges? And in my work, I actually tell a past life story that matches the symbolism with the nodes. Now, does the story I tell with my clients happen exactly that way? Probably not. But the idea is it's meant to be a parable that parallels past life experience so that we can understand what it must have felt like to be us in that previous incarnation. The reason I use the reincarnational model is because there's actually 3 massive mountains of data that points to, that's actually what's going on here between lifetimes. And, of course, that's a common philosophy you'll find all over the world. But if you look at, the research around near-death experiences, there have been documented many thousands upon thousands of cases of people, dying on the table in the hospital or wherever, and then having this experience where they go to the light, they see their loved ones, and typically they're told, it's not your time yet, and then they enter back into their body. You'll find this, the research is extensive. I'll just share a quick little anecdote about my own personal life. When I was 14, I was heavily involved in a local community theater that my uncle ran. Also, my dad was a big part of it as well. And it was really my sanctuary, my home away from home, because I very much was an outcast or an outsider of a teenager. So I really loved hanging out with the thespian crowd. Anyways, at one point, there was a gentleman who joined the theater, and he, not as an actor, but as a makeup artist. And he actually worked for Hollywood. He was a bigwig down there, and here he was working with this little podunk theater. And to us, it was a really big deal because his work was just amazing. And he grew quite close to my uncle and my dad. And he shared a personal story of his, which really, as a 14-year-old, blew my mind wide open. And that was, I think he was in either his late 40s, maybe early 50s, and he had a serious heart attack. And he actually died. I don't know if he was pronounced dead in the ambulance or at the hospital, but they tried to revive him over and over again and couldn't, and pronounced him dead. And during this time, he went to the light and saw his family, his soul family, and was greeted by his father that passed away many years before, who he was very close with. And his father looked at him and said, it's not your time yet. You've got to go back. And he kind of protested like, oh, no, I think I'd like to stay. This is actually, I'm feeling peace and love. This is beautiful. And no, his father was very serious. You need to go back. And then instantly, he was back in his body, and he was very confused and disoriented because he was having trouble catching his breath. It was pitch black. He didn't know where he was. He heard this woman screaming and running down the hall behind him. Turns out he woke up in a body bag. They were carting him to wherever they bring the bodies in the hospital. So here he was coming back to life after being pronounced dead in a body bag. It's a crazy story. He was a very humble guy. I had no reason to think he misled us. But this was an amazing story. And obviously, the reason he shared it with us is to tell us it totally was a paradigm shifter for him. before that, I don't think he really believed in an afterlife. But obviously that was an eye-opening experience and changed the direction and flow of the rest of his life. And it was a eye-opening experience for me as well at the tender age of 14. But there's countless stories like this with near-death experiences. The other mountain of data is there's been case studies of thousands of kids, usually under the age of about 3 or 4. I think this work was done by Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, where they heard of children, young children, recalling past lives, recalling the names of their past life in some cases, sometimes in even really strange cases, being able to speak the language of their previous lifetime. And there's been thorough research and documentation about these cases. My favorite story about this I recently read about was there was a young 3-year-old from, I think it was Israel or maybe Syria, who recalled being murdered in a past life by getting hit in the head with an axe. And actually, he had a large red birthmark on his forehead, a long birthmark shaped like a wound, actually, from a sharp object. And he could recall his previous name and even the village that he used to live in his previous lifetime. And the doctor who was researching this, I forget his name, but he took the kid and actually went to the village that he claimed to be coming from. And remember, this is a 3-year-old. And they were walking, there was a small village, and they were walking down a neighborhood, and he said, that was my old house. He looked at the old house. And then, there was a crowd gathering around because this was bringing attention. And he said, and there is my killer. He came up to the killer and he called him by name. And then the gentleman responded and confirmed, yes, that's my name. And then the boy said, you're the one who killed me in my last life. And the doctor who was researching this story looked at the other guy, the claimed killer, and saw his face turn white as a ghost. And then the little child said, I can even take you to where my body was buried. And they walked a little bit to this pile of rocks and said, you'll find my body there under those rocks, and the axe is actually over there. And they did. They uncovered the rocks and found a skeleton with a hole in the skull matching the shape of an axe. And that's a very extreme rare story, but very interesting. But there's many cases similar to that. I think Ian Stevenson compiled, a few thousand kids recalling their previous lives. And then the third mountain of data for reincarnation being a reality is the work of Michael Newton. He was the author of a series of books, but the first one was The Journey of Souls. And that book really changed my life. I've always been a spiritual person, but I was always uncertain as to what that really meant. I believed that my infinite soul had lived on beyond this finite experience here on earth, but I wasn't sure what really happened, and I kind of just shrugged my shoulders and thought, well, I'm not supposed to know. Anytime we as humans try to conceptualize God, it turns from God to fantasy, and I really believed that. But after I read this book, Journey of Souls, I was like, okay, this is some compelling evidence, because this guy, Michael Newton, he was a doctor somewhere on the East Coast of America. And when he went to school, when he went to college, he was top of his class, valedictorian, high performer, staunch atheist. And he ended up specializing in hypnotherapy at some, the psychology branch of a well-known hospital on the East Coast. And he would, in his hypnosis work, take his patients into deep, deep trance and comb through their life and try to find, a trauma that happened when they were 3 years old that caused them to, have some malady later in life, really working with the subconscious mind beautifully. And he found clinical value in that, therapeutic value. But he was so good at it. He gained a lot of attention. And all the time he would get requests from patients, can you please do a past life regression? I want to know what happened in a past life of mine. And he would always refuse them because it didn't fit his model of what reality was, because he was an atheist. He didn't think there was life after death. He thought it was nonsense and there was no therapeutic value to it. Well, along came somebody, came to his doorstep, a patient of his, who had been through the ringer of all that Western medicine had to offer. And they had chronic pain along the left side of their body, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was destroying their life. They couldn't function. They just had this unbearable pain all along that side of their body. And nothing worked. Drugs didn't work. Nothing. So, this is common for hypnotherapists, where people who their last attempt, their last hope, is something a little bit more, seemingly woo-woo, and so this person ended up on Michael Newton's doorstep. So anyways, he takes this person into deep trance, and over multiple sessions, combing over the past experience of this person's life, he just could not find the root cause of this person's malady. Then, in one session, sort of out of frustration, Michael asked his patient, well, just take me to the root of your pain, just quite bluntly, matter-of-factly. And then this person immediately started telling a story and recalling their experience being in World War I, in the trenches, and being bayoneted all along the left side of their body by a Frenchman. And Michael Newton was stunned. He kind of knew what was happening, this telling of a so-called past life story, but he still struggled to accept it, to believe it. Yet, this person, after this session, the pain went away forever. So therefore, Michael had to admit that there was therapeutic value. And he kind of shelved this in the back of his mind in the well, that was really weird section of his mind, and he tried to forget about it, but he couldn't. It really ate at him. And he then said, okay, this has therapeutic value, let's give this a shot. And he started giving past life hypnosis sessions to some of his patients with great success. And then in one of these sessions, he figured out that he could actually replay the person's death sequence in the previous life and then follow the soul up into the spirit world. And then the person in deep trance would tell Michael in session what it was like in the spirit world. And Michael coined it the life between lives. And he has an extensive case study of 3,000 or 4,000 people, of people recalling not only their past lives, but what it's like in the spirit world. And they were all basically telling him the same thing. So you have this impressive set of variables and data of people from all over the world, probably, who didn't know each other at all, telling him about basically the same experiences. So this is very compelling evidence. So when you look at these three mountains of data, this really convinced me that reincarnation is what really goes on. And that between lives, we actually plan our next life. And the goal for incarnating is to learn, to grow closer to God. So this is why I practice a style of astrology that uses the reincarnational model, because I believe it's really what's going on here in the grand scheme of things. So if we're here to learn, it's very important to leverage tools that help us to do so, to help us to learn quicker, because it will help us to mature psychologically, but also spiritually on the grand scheme of things. So in uncovering our karmic wounds, our karmic imbalances, finding out what went wrong, where we may have been led astray in the previous life, we can then focus on what's the medicine, which would be the north node of the moon in the birth chart. What are the set of experiences that we really need to really offset and find balance in that karma, and also, learn the lesson that we've elected to learn? So in conclusion, evolutionary astrology is a powerful tool. Now, I focused primarily on the reincarnational aspect of it, but in future videos, I'll be talking more in depth and how we can prescriptively use this in our life. If this resonated with you and you're a fellow stargazer with zodiacal zest, please leave a comment below, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and follow me on this journey in expanding our consciousness.